All right.
All right, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Okay. Now, my question earlier was Marilyn is in here. Should she be in as a panelist or just visiting?
Panelist.
Okay, then she's up. She's muted, but she's here.
Also, if you see Chris, he just called me for the Zoom link, so he may be on the way as well.
Say that one more time.
Chris Kushel, he said that he needed to the Zoom. He needed to get the Zoom link from me, so I just sent that to him via email. So please
Okay.
be on the lookout for Chris to dial in.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Hey, Marilyn.
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi.
Oh, there goes Marilyn. Where did there Jen?
Six, eight, nine, three, nine, zero.
689-390. Yeah.
Jen, is there a number we could dial into with um the phone here so we might be able to hear better?
Hold on 1 second. I can get it for you. I can give you the webinar ID.
A straight up phone number with an
Yeah,
extension.
you're looking for the phone. Hold on, I can get it. It's going to be on the website in your stuff.
Yeah, this won't work anyway.
Never mind.
Don't worry. There's only a power cord.
I have, what was the name of the person who was supposed to be coming in?
Chris Kushel?
Yep. Okay,
Chris.
hold on.
Thank you.
I've only got his first initial, so I wasn't sure if it was the right person.
Hello, Chris. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Welcome to your new computer. How's it working
Yeah,
out for
I'll change my name if I can figure that out, so it's not C. Kushel.
you? All good. All right. I think we have everyone here. So let's see. So Jen posted the agenda. So Pledge of Allegiance. I want to spend a few minutes, not a lot of time, following up on our awareness efforts, public meetings. Chris, I want to spend the bulk of the time talking about what you sent on Monday, and then follow up with any public comments. So without further ado, let's do the pledge. All right, a few minutes here and follow up on our awareness efforts. We spent great length last meeting talking about getting the awareness out. Jared was so kind to quickly turn around a quick little flyer for us to use. Reached out to Darwin to get that to Business Association. There are a few other items here. Anyone else do any other outreach? I know we talked about a few different areas. I know Marilyn, you said possibly doing a press release or reaching out to, let me read my notes here. Well, open the
Yeah, I
floor.
can just report quickly. I sent you an email just requesting that on Jared's flyer, we enclose 50 West High Street as the physical address for the meeting, because most
Yep.
people won't be aware of what that location is. And
Got it.
Jared's text on that flyer should be the basis for doing the postcard mailing to all village residents.
Yeah.
And I did speak with Jennifer about publicity. And so Terry O'Connor and Jennifer will get the press releases that will be distributed on their end to the village's official print media outlets. But the village should also create a Facebook event for each one of the Zoning 101 workshops, as well as the official public workshop in October.
Yeah, so I
And
also reached
I am
out
working-
to. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you off. You had more to say.
Yeah, and so the zoning 101 press release, I will use the basis of Jared's text with the added address and a brief addition of the information for the print media press release going out for the zoning 101 presentation that will be at Saratoga today, since the village will take care of the official media outlets that they use.
Okay,
And finally, the October 10th meeting, I did book a reservation for the Extension Auditorium, and I asked for all of the digital AV equipment that we need. And the time that I booked it for is 6 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. But the remaining thing that I need from Chris is a room setup plan for how he and his firm is going to conduct the public workshop. And that's so the janitor can essentially set the room up from,
perfect,
6 to 6:45.
perfect. Yeah, that's a detail we can get in later, Chris, don't bother.
Okay.
All right, any other vectors here, any other avenues, Marilyn? Because you covered a lot of bases there.
The only thing I was going to ask is, I didn't see a set of minutes from our last meeting, and I seem to recall, but correct me if I'm wrong, that the draft PowerPoints for these public workshops were supposed to be done 3 days before the first workshop. And I'm just wondering if it would be a lot easier if we could see a draft of the PowerPoint that's going to be developed using the recommended slides that Chris had from another community. If we could see that a little bit sooner rather than at the very last moment.
So we'll have about a week's turnaround time from the 12th till the 17th to review that. So if we'll talk about that later, that specific topic later. But if Anna and Rory and myself can get that done ahead of time, then yes, I don't see why not. But more to come on that front. Also on the readout, I reached out to also Frank and Jen at the office. Jen said she posted the flyer to the website, but want to also talk with the mayor a little bit about any other avenues of awareness we can talk about later. Mailings or
If that's July 4th, just kind of my advice on some of this, because nobody's gonna pay attention to anything between now and then, it seems like anyway. It will come out a lot of stuff in the first one, obviously, at that point, and then eventually repeat the second one.
okay. All right, another one here, Spectrum News Community Calendar. Margaret, she is not here, so I don't know if said she'd commit to calling Charter, see if she can post to their Spectrum News channel. Anything else? Any other ideas that could work?
We did talk about sending something out and sending a water bill. Right? Sending
I
a
think
water
the
bill.
timing was,
Excuse me?
the timing was just the card.
No. So we send the bill.
Yeah.
Okay, we
So
send
now,
something
the
out.
bill's going out of August, so.
Oh, it's good. So there's a lot of somebody takes care of that.
That's what the public works out.
Yeah, all right, sure.
We may cover 2 of the 3 public meetings.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, more to come on that. All right, any other items for that topic before we move on? All right, so the next one here is review of Fisher and Associates' first deliverable zoning assessment. So Chris finished a document and sent it to me Monday early afternoon, and I quickly turned around and sent it out to the group for review Monday afternoon as well. So Chris, this looks like a summary that you sent out. Will we also be expecting like the diagnostic part of that towards the end of the month?
Well, I guess when you say diagnostic, my plan was that this was this deliverable, and now we're going to get into the actual zoning. The next step was starting to write the actual zoning code. When you say diagnostic, what are you expecting or hoping for?
Well, I was reading this and I was a little concerned about the level of detail I saw in here. So there was a lot of
Okay.
stuff. We spent a lot of time doing an assessment. The ZAC committee took our time, months actually, to put together a detailed gap of what we thought could be areas of improvement. Either there were gaps or redundant. We didn't know. We're not the experts. And so I think some of the expectation was that we were going to see more specific details as opposed to just what frankly looked like a summation, a summary of what we've provided you, not any specific details of, like, for example, in my mind, if I was doing this, and I'm not the expert, I would do something like observation 1, and then do a citation, and then maybe a recommendation, observation 2, recommendation, a lot of that detail. Instead, what I saw was just a rehash of some of the topics we talked about. You offered an approach, and then there were 1 or 2 hot topics that were teed up for us that could be construed as recommendations. But some of those topics that we've talked about, I would say, would be on equal playing field of all of the other observations that I know you've made that were not in this document. So in my mind, I was very underwhelmed, and I think it's a little concerning at this point. We're 4 months in, and so I saw this document come to us as you're putting a few questions back on the ZAC to answer to you before you can get started. For example, we talked as a group of what direction do we want to go? Do we want to do a moderate approach, or do we want to do a complete rewrite? Well, that is guidance, but in addition to that, we are expecting you to pop the hood, go into the specific details, and say, I see. And you did actually provide a proposed structure as well, but there's nothing to hang on that table of contents. There's no specifics that I'm hoping that you have. Maybe they're not written down, but for all intents and purposes, I was a little underwhelmed by this document, and frankly, it's a little concerning at this stage in the game. So I don't quite know what to expect. So I'll stop there because I have a second part of my conversation that I want to get back to, but I want at least to get your perspective on your thoughts on what's been delivered thus far and how you want to continue this engagement, like in your process, where you want to go from here.
Okay. Well, first, I'm very sorry, and I take a lot of pride in my work, and I feel very personally concerned that what I provided was not to what your expectation was, and whoever else feels the same way, which maybe is the whole group or maybe a portion of the group. So I'm sorry about that, and I don't know if this was a miscommunication in terms of what this this document was intended to provide. Maybe I should say how I was envisioning that we would take this and work from it, and see if that either allays fears, or if not, let's talk about what you need best to help for what you find most useful.
Sure.
My feeling was that this, as an assessment, what we would do is say, okay, here are the big topics. I didn't feel the need to, and I think we talked about this, sort of go nitty gritty by each single point, because you all have captured a lot of that on the spreadsheet. And as we go through this, we would be addressing a lot of these topics. I was trying to provide kind of the high level issues.
Okay.
And that's why I also provided, we did some.
I saw you kind of laid out the groupings and categories of potential areas of concern.
And then we also did some of these mapping analyses, which was new work that you hadn't previously seen, to sort of show here are some of the issues. So, for example, the nonconformities. So this was part of the analysis. Well, let's see, do you have these nonconformities? And you do in these 3 areas where we had some readily available information to see. And so this was an example. Well, okay, you have these lots that don't match your what you actually have there. So this is a very clear opportunity to change dimensional standards. It's not the only one, but that's one kind of very, in my mind, discrete area.
Yeah, and we knew about
Uh,
stuff like that. Those are specifics we kind of knew going into this, saying, "Hey, we need help. We know that there are non-conforming uses. We know we're having an issue with grandfathering and changing some of the regs to accommodate some of the properties that are out of compliance." Well, like,
yeah. And
continue.
sorry, so anyway, so the next step as I envisioned it, and this is kind of the process that, again, I've mentioned how we're doing this basically exact same project in the village of Fairport, and we're further along. And so we got to this point of this initial assessment, getting there's no one right or wrong answer. And this is why, in my mind, what's really critical is understanding from you all, which is the direction in terms of these different, is it this kind of big approach, change, complete update, or are we doing this more moderate change? Because it's that decision alters the way that we're going to move the approach
Sure.
forward. So,
And I
for
get
example, yeah, so the way that I would envision it, let's say you say, okay, we're going to do this moderate approach version. And if we now do that, the question is, the next step is, what's the organization of this structure of this bylaw? To me, that's the first step, is what is the organization of it?
Okay.
I've been given a proposal there as again, it's not definitive because you all might have feedback, but I tried to be concrete and say, this is the first step. Once we get that, I can then block everything out. I can take what you have from your existing bylaw or existing zoning code. I can rearrange it. And then I envision that over the next few months, we're going section by section. So as one example, definitions. This is going to be an area that we always need to make updates. But there are some updates that I can recommend. Like if you have, what we often see is you have terms that are defined in your definitions, but they're not found anywhere in the zoning code. It's a clear, obvious thing where we can remove it. More important, but this is something that I can't get until I get information from typically the building commissioner or potentially a zoning board or planning board. What are the definitions that you're missing that have come up? Or what are the definitions that are ambiguous and that are causing you trouble? Those are the types of things that we would be working on as a group or a subset of the group as we move forward. And I would envision that we would kind of be doing that section by section, as opposed to trying to have this master document that has all the answers. And I don't know if that's what you're suggesting that I provide, but I don't see how I could do that, I guess.
Understood. So may I interject briefly?
Yes, please.
I think putting the questions back on us, I think we are looking to you to provide, based on your assessment, recommendations. Now, I'm going to speak in generalities. So I think we are looking for you to be the SME and provide recommendations for us to bat around and debate yes or no. This document put out several fundamental questions back to us that we're like, well, we've talked about, we're either going to do the complete rewrite or the moderate approach. Or things like, and there are several other kind of teed up issues in there for us to either make a decision on. I don't know if some of those items rise to the occasion of like fundamental approaches, like we need to go down this path or that path. But I think I would say in general, this whole process, we're going to look to you to, based on what you know, provide your recommendation, and then we debate that here, if we like that or not. So that's one approach. So getting the question on the table about whether we do the full rewrite or
Yeah.
partial, we haven't even discussed this yet, because we could have been back months ago. We could have taken some time to do that, but we didn't realize that's a gating issue now, that in this process it should have been, in my mind, addressed sooner. That said, going section by section makes sense, but based on this document here, I feel like maybe it's a style thing, or maybe it's expectations that we're kind of going away. But based on what I'm seeing from you now, is I'm hopeful that it's not the case that we go section by section, And there's going to be put back on a lot of us to write the code and then us to sit there and try to figure out what's good and what's bad. I'm hoping it's going to be the other way around where we help guide because we don't know what we don't know. And so
Sure.
I'm a little concerned about us doing a lot of the writing and
Sure,
based on
and
what
that's not the intent, Matt. In terms of this fundamental structure, I'm happy to talk it. I was assuming that we would be talking that through tonight and not necessarily, I don't know if you'd be making that decision tonight or not. It doesn't, I wasn't expecting it because I think that's a big discussion. I'm very happy to give my opinion on this. I guess what I'm trying to be sensitive to is that there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way, and it partially comes down to almost comfort of the community. And if we want to talk about this specific topic, I can talk it through and I can give you my recommendation. I was just trying to be sensitive, and for all the sections, I'm very happy, and I was expecting to. I will write it like I will just go back to the definitions. I will put all the definitions in, and then we'll basically say to speaking to the building commissioner, are any of the definitions you have causing you issues? And then we'll adjust them that way. When we get to process, administrative process, I know some of the issues that have been raised by members of the committee, planning board chair, for example. I will present a recommendation and recommended language, but I just have to make sure that everyone's comfortable. So I didn't want to be so definitive about here's what the solution is, because I think it ends up having to be collaborative, because these are the people in this room, some of them are the ones actually administering the code. And that's really what I was trying to be sensitive to, that fact. I wasn't trying to shirk my duties or put more on this group than you already have done, because you have done so much. And I want to recognize that. So again, I apologize that it didn't come through in this document.
Another concern I have would be, okay, so I can see how you want to go section by section in a collaborative manner. Two things that come into my mind is one of the I want to go back to the other part of my prior conversation. I'm hopeful that we're aligned on expectations in terms of going forward of like, we've done a lot of due diligence and education ourselves and provided some feedback. I'm hoping from here on out, you will be driving a lot of the questions and the decisions and some of the meetings, essentially, of like the engagement here, because we've got to the point now where we've educated ourselves. We think we know some areas, but now it's on you to help us pull the rest of the way through. And so my expectation is, hopefully is yours as well, is you're going to start driving some of these conversations with the ZAC to get an end product.
And that is 100% what I was expecting. I mean, these first few months in my mind was, as you requested, you guys wanted to sort of understand the code yourself. And like I said, you've done so much detail.
Yeah.
I feel like my work is really just starting now. That's sort of what we had said. Like it was 3 months, and now it's, and that's why in my mind, understanding, you all being comfortable with the proposed structure is really such in my mind, a fundamental step now, because once I know that, then I can essentially have things to present to you, as opposed to kind of what has now been the opposite of you essentially presenting to me.
And then here's one other item I want to just mention. Based on what I'm seeing so far, I'm becoming a little more uncomfortable, I'd say, with having like the first draft, if you will, beginning of November. Based on what I'm seeing here. So I almost want to revisit the schedule, but I want to see where your head's at, because I need confidence, Chris, and I'm not sure, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody here, but I need a little more confidence that November is far away and it's towards the end of our engagement. I want to be able to see more of our return sooner to reinstill that confidence. So is there any way we can get creative on turning some iterations of this draft over sooner? Or what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on that statement right there about?
Yeah. So in terms of the draft, the big sort of my mind, the part that I feel like a collective we needs to sort of can't finalize is until after the public engagement. And that's one of certain sections where, because
that makes sense. You can't finalize it. I get the end part.
I wouldn't, yeah, and you know, I wouldn't personally feel comfortable, but again, if you all want to and feel like it is appropriate, we can to, you know, if there are changes to the zoning boundaries or if we're creating new districts, like all of these are pretty big things that the public's gonna really care about. Like people don't care about the zoning code itself, but they care about their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And if we're doing things that might affect their neighborhood, they're gonna have some strong opinions on it. So we can have everything else done before then. I mean, you know, like the administrative stuff, the definitions, the organization, the document itself, all of that can be done, you know, a large portion, let's say in September, let's put it that way.
Okay, no, all right. That makes sense. Thank you for kind of talking me off the ledge a little bit. So I think we're looking for, and you're right, we did take the time up front to do our due diligence. But being mindful of the contract, the statement of work, and the schedule we laid out, we agreed to, and it like the end of October, beginning of November for the first official timeline. As long as you're comfortable starting to send us over.
So Matt, I'm sorry, all of a sudden you kind of blank, it's kind of getting blurry. I'm
Yeah.
missing the last sentence you're saying.
Sorry about that. How about now? Okay, good. So I know we said on paper and that we agreed to a schedule the end of October, beginning of November as the first official draft. But I think what you're proposing, and if I'm understanding you correctly, there's going to be chunks or sections of zoning that you'll get to us that we can start based on your recommendations and input from us. We can start going through and debating and redlining and voting on yay or nay on certain topics as you go through.
100%. Yes.
Okay.
The way that I envision it, and just to be clear about it, is I envision having, once we get a clarification or, you know, discussion or consensus on this kind of general framework on it, I will have kind of a whole package of it with placeholders where we haven't addressed things yet. But
Okay.
then we'll be filling in the texts in these big chunks for you to address as we go along.
So I've spoken enough, I think. I know a lot of other folks here in the room have a lot to say. But before we get to that, I think let's just address really quick. I think we're all pretty much educated on what we've seen in the zoning code. Do we feel comfortable right now giving an opinion, each one of us on the ZAC committee, of what we want to do? That we do lipstick on the pig or we do a rewrite? Or do we need to have some discussion around this?
We need to have a discussion.
At the very least, we need to talk. Chris, I don't know how long in this adjusted timeline, when would you want us
Can you
to-
turn the computer audio towards whoever's speaking?
Yeah, we're just limited here.
Built-in microphone.
I know.
And sorry, now I've lost my train of thought. Having the plan to start working through section by section over the next few months, when would you need us to have, for you, Chris, you know, a clear, here's the way we want to proceed structurally in order for you to start, you know, making those updates and sharing them with us?
I mean, I would need it. So I guess just from a logistics perspective,
Yeah.
I'm going on vacation at the end of next week. I'll be back July 10th. So realistically, not much is going to be done before then. So, you know, if this committee can have that by then, that would be, then I can move forward with that.
I'm sorry, when is that again?
the week until the 10th?
You'll be back the week before, though. You'll be back on the 10th.
So if we vote for you by the 12th,
That might be it.
and potential opportunity for you to start working through it.
I really can't hear. Sorry.
Okay, I thought the microphone would catch me there.
Very directional microphone.
I know, no kidding. If we had it by the 12th, then, you know, that might
I
be
just
enough.
wanted clarification. What is July 10th? Is that the deadline?
That's when he's
to
back
get
in town and it
feedback?
matters. That's when he's back
The
in town. We
deadline
need a
for-
decision by.
I'm sorry.
We just
The
need to make a mind
deadline
up
for
by,
the ZAC.
yes. Yes, let's
The
just make our
deadline
mind
for
up.
the ZAC to come to Could I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Is it
Go
the
ahead.
deadline for the ZAC to develop consensus on the proposed outline and structure that Chris has proposed?
It's a binary decision, whether we do a full rewrite or the medium proposal.
And yeah, Marilyn, July 10th is when Chris will be back from his holiday. So if
No,
we
I
had,
understood that part.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah. And so just for, having this really a well-rounded conversation, just to let Chris know that I felt that he gave us a lot of information to digest in a very short period of time before the meeting. I'm not sure I could formulate a decision in time for his return from his vacation. And I base that opinion on the fact that as a ZAC, we haven't even shared with one another what our consensus is on all of the topics that we've done due diligence on. So unlike other meetings and other committees that I've been on, where when a team brainstorms on something, reviews something, develops a proposal, you read it out, you share it with the larger group. That has not been done here. So a group of a team member that may have discussed, let's just say, site plan issues or facades or the sign language, none of that has been shared with the bigger group. Maybe 2 or 3 people know what has been discussed and what conceptually they'd like to see, but that hasn't been shared with the full ZAC. So I think that's an important part of the process. Now,
Is it
unfortunately,
important or is it a gating
we
issue?
don't have the time. I'm sorry?
Is it an important process or is it a blocker to make progress? We as in we must have that done before we can make progress.
Well, we have to do that to
Do you
develop
think it's a blocker?
consensus. We
I don't
have
think
to
that's a
do
blocker.
that to develop.
I don't think
I don't want to use someone else's words, but we have to have a conversation because quite frankly, I don't know what every team thinks about their topic or in general. And I think that would be ill-informed if we move quickly to make a decision prematurely before having known everybody's opinion. And, this is supposed to be an advisory committee. I'm not seeing so much advising happening as I'm seeing little silos being isolated on various topics. We've not briefed each other. We haven't identified all the items that we would be comfortable with. And I just think we have more conversing that we need to do to share our viewpoints. And I frankly did not know what to expect from Chris's memo. But I will say there's some things in the memo that I question, specifically some information I think is misinformation that needs to be nipped in the bud. And then I do have significant questions about some of the maps that Chris has proposed, because frankly, I can't interpret what's there either due to the design of the legend or the implied decisions or analysis underneath the map.
Okay.
So I think trying to make a decision tonight about anything is not helpful. And I was hoping that Chris would give like a high-cut executive briefing on his memo, because quite frankly, 3.5 days to review that memo prior to tonight's meeting is not enough time to digest the volume of information that Chris is sharing.
Okay, so I agree and I disagree several points. Number one, I think it's a bit too early to do some analysis paralysis. I think where we need to sit there and have the debates amongst ourselves and sit there and get the back and forth is not even before we get off the ground. it's we debate what's on the zoning code. Is proposed, Chris needs to propose something. And then Marilyn, amongst ourselves, we need to have those conversations. Because if we have those conversations now about just the due diligence we performed, we will never have any time to actually do the analysis and the due diligence when we have something actual that matters in front of us. So debating on what I know versus what Pete knows that's actually going to go in the document before it's in the document is a complete waste of time, in my opinion. So I'm not sure what you dropped out, so I'm not sure you've heard any of that. But I think right now the fundamental question is we don't need to boil the ocean to determine what we've all seen is, do we need a full rewrite to accommodate all of the issues we've seen? Or do we need to have, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine, just so you know.
So I guess my point is that we do all this analysis now. We will never get to the point where Chris will be able to give us something to even have the real conversation, what's on paper. We got to get something in front of us. So I think ultimately, as a group, we need to decide. This is just my opinion. So we can do. This is not about me. I look at this and think, okay, our due diligence we've done to date is, in my mind, is there enough of just so much that's wrong with it that we either throw it out and start new, or do we think based on what we've seen, do we think we can work with this? I think that's fundamentally not understand every little single detail and then share every little detail there. That will just do nothing to help solve or help answer the question on the table. Now, what Marilyn's proposing, we absolutely have to do. And so, Marilyn, I will reiterate, the ZAC is an advisory committee. We advise the Board of Trustees on a zoning law, not what information is in there. It's not it. We do that once we have a draft of the zoning or section, like Chris was saying, sections of the zone in front of us. We do that due diligence then, not beforehand, or else, because that is multiple analysis we'll have to do, makes no sense. So I guess the question, I just want to reframe this so we don't go down any rabbit holes at 20 minutes to 8. I think Chris is asking for us to make a decision based on what we've seen. If we need more time, that's fine. We can do that. I think I'm hearing we may need more time, but based on what we've seen so far, do we think a rewrite is worth it because there's so much wrong with the current code? Or do we think what we've read, that it's enough for us to continue on with the framework that we have in place? In my mind, that's what the question is. We don't have to, and what are the ramifications for a complete rewrite versus the ramifications of just fixing what we have? I think that's really what we have to trade the rest on the table right now. No other debate of who knows what, that's irrelevant, because we will get to what Marilyn's talking about, because we are an advisory committee, not right now.
Can we pose that question to you, Chris? What if we selected one or the other, the moderate update versus the complete rewrite? What would you see as the different, the key differences in the process and in the output?
Sure. Do you want me to address that now, or? Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. So here's how I view them. First, in terms of how let's start with how I see them as similar. I think the outline, in my mind, what you have today in your existing zoning code needs to be dramatically changed. And that's why that was one section where I went to some detail. I think it would be largely the same, but not completely the same, regardless of the two approaches. So I think that's a similarity, not 100%, but a similarity. Now, the way that I would approach this, if we are going with what we're calling the moderate approach, I will take your zoning code, I will basically cut and paste and rearrange the whole thing so that it falls within these new chapters or sections and subsections of your zoning code. So we'll basically be starting from your existing language, just reorganized. And then we will go through, and based upon your comments in particular, as well as the other things that I've caught, we will go through and see what needs to be deleted, what needs to be rewritten, and then what needs to be updated. We can still make some, absolutely changes to the dimensional standards, the boundaries, all that stuff is all fair game, but I view that as probably less strong than if we're doing the complete change process. With the complete change process, the way that I would envision is basically starting from a precedent example. That's kind of what we're starting from. And that's especially for like administrative things and process things, because I know that there are issues that have been raised in terms of the way that you deal with nonconformities and other aspects related to process. So we would be starting from a new language and then taking things from your existing code that you actually do like, or things that aren't in this template example. So like if historic preservation, I know is a very hot topic in the village, that's not addressed in this template. Now we have to probably rewrite things and do things different, but that's something that's going to be new. The final piece that in my mind is very different is the way that the complete change process would be sort of, the districts would be framed in a slightly different way. So instead of being these current, use-based districts, you're still going to have uses because that's so critical to the character of each of your neighborhoods, but we're going to frame it by the actual built development characteristics. So for example, in your downtown, you'd probably say, okay, you're allowed to do commercial buildings, you're allowed to do mixed use buildings, maybe something else we talk about, but those are the two obvious ones. Each of those buildings then have different requirements and characteristics that are applicable that would help shape the development. You'd also still have your use table. You might have, right now you have very few residential districts, but you do have a lot more neighborhoods. So you might now split up your residential districts if certain neighborhoods decide there are certain characteristics of their neighborhood that they want to carry forth and be regulated. So I'll just give an example that's, something we're dealing with in Fairport, which might not be the case here, but they have a neighborhood where all of the homes have these open front porches. They want to regulate that for this neighborhood, but it's not applicable to other neighborhoods. So we have a potential to help shape the character of these neighborhoods better. It would be tough to do that, not impossible in the moderate change. So that's why it really comes down to sort of what you as a committee or the village gives me direction in terms of like what you feel meets your needs. I can give you my recommendation, but that's the answer to the question about how I would approach it from a process.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I kind of had a feeling based on the memo, reading through those final recommendations that particularly when it comes to our comprehensive plan, that complete rewrite approach would hopefully address more of what's outlined there than the moderate update. Would you say that that's accurate?
I would say that's accurate. I would say if the village feels like the existing code is doing a good job of regulating the actual sort of development built environment portion of it, then maybe you don't need to go for the full rewrite. If you're really focused more on the process part, then maybe moderate is okay. But, again, I was coming from the starting point of your comprehensive plan, and that had some sort of bigger change in recommendations.
See if there's any other comments in the room here, Chris.
I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Can you speak in
I can speak very loudly. How's that? My concern is primarily with your understanding of what happens in a zoning board meeting and a planning board meeting now with the existing code that we have. I've asked several times if you could at least get some of the minutes off the website and read exactly what we go through as a result of the code language that we have. My concern is the process and the contradictory nature of some of the zoning. Where I stand on whether it should be rewritten completely or not is much more contingent upon you understanding what the chaos is when our zoning code is called into question. The best person to get that information from is the building inspector. I don't know how many conversations you've had. I suggest you have the night you haven't had any.
I'm sorry, I just started losing you. I was hearing you up until now.
What I said was, I'd like to see you talk to the building inspector at length, okay, about the problems that he perceives exist. Because he is the person who initially gets involved in enforcing the code. What happens after an application comes into him ends up with Anna or myself. I think reading the minutes of some of our meetings for the last 2 or 3 years would be a massively important educational process for you to see where the stumbling blocks really are in this document. Because it's really very simple when after you've seen about 5 meetings, you'll understand very well exactly where the problems are. In terms of the rest of it, I haven't made up my mind yet. All right. I read the master plan again yesterday. It's like reading War and Peace. But the end result of it all is this group has to decide which way they want to proceed to help you help us. But in order for you to help us, you have to see the problems as they exist in reality in real time. And that's from reading the minutes of these meetings.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I can read a handful of the minutes. I mean, do you recommend I just pick any at large, or are there particular ones that you feel like?
What?
I'm sorry.
I said anyone you want, or we'll send you a few. Okay, so you can see what we go through. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would be, and then I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one, as I'm sure Anna is, about the actual procedure and process we go through in these meetings. Because the code may or may not be terrible, but the confliction and the confusion and the different places things are and the organization of it makes it very, very difficult. And it's contradictory. But that doesn't mean it's all wrong either.
Anyone else for Chris?
I had one question, Chris. I'm looking through all these maps, and one question I had, and I was actually gonna do this at work if I needed to. Do you have a analysis of all of the R1s that are coded 210s, 220s, 220s, 230s? So basically multi-residences that are in R1s. Who has the illegal apartments? Who has have you
Yeah,
got any?
so one of the map that's on page 17 is I believe what doesn't this cover that information?
I don't know.
It shows by property class, and I grade out the non-R district, and it shows everything else. And you can see there's quite a few that are 2, 3 families or other uses.
Been in R1, is that right?
Yeah, that's page 17.
I don't see it on page number. Oh, there.
Well, I don't know if it's
17,
overlay, it just
alright.
identifies, on page 17, it just identifies the family residence, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's just overlay with, but you get to know which ones are one.
I don't think that's the one.
Well, this is a one-family residence with accessory, so you're saying that those are the only ones in the
No.
village?
That's not the one.
It can't be.
There's another page in here.
So yeah, and there's one family residence is yellow, 2 family residence, pink, 1 family residence with ADUs is orange, 3 families that can attend to.
I can overlay that with our one,
Yeah.
too, that's not missing from it.
That's exactly what I'm looking
I
for.
would overlay it.
Overlay an R1 with a 2-family residence.
I'm sorry, what is it missing?
I'm just looking for overlay an R1 with a 2 or 3 family residence.
So the map on page 17 with the zoning lines over it.
Well, I believe that map, if you take away the gray, everything that it's showing is the R1. So I grayed out the non-R1, or I had grayed out the staff person that did this.
As to
And so
identify non-conforming.
Okay,
So that's showing everything. So, obviously the yellow is conforming, and everything that's not yellow. Some of those blues might be conforming because there are some other uses that are allowed that are non-residential.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or commentary for Chris?
Yep, so I just had a question about that grayed out area. Could you explain that again? Because I think part of that includes the central business district, is that correct?
Yeah, that should include all the, like, your R2 district and the down to the central business district, the adult district. It should be grayed out if it's not the R1. That's the intent of the map. Obviously there could be a mistake and we can change it if needed. I think even if there is slightly issues with the borders, I think it tells the story though of the general issue.
Any other questions or comments for Chris? All right, so based on our conversation tonight, what do we agree upon in terms of, do we need more time to debate whether we do a full rewrite or a partial?
Absolutely.
Probably we should talk about it more.
We should talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me bring up the schedule here. Well, 7/18 is our next meeting, 7/18. Do we want to talk amongst us?
No, that's a public workshop.
Yeah.
So so basically, in order to stay on track, which we don't have a choice, we need to come up with a decision before then. So that means we all have to chip in some more time to get together and hash this out.
We could get that together in live, and that would give us a little more time to review.
Also give us time to share our result with Chris by the time, he thinks he can get back to work on it. That's only a couple weeks away, but
7/11.
yeah.
If we're going to meet on 7/11, I propose we just all do a remote on Zoom. Does anyone have any concerns with meeting on the 11th with a specific topic? Whether we do the moderate approach or the full rewrite. So if that's going to be the agenda, then I know Jen's on the call, but I'll send a note out to Jen saying public meeting posted, Zoom meeting only. And we'll get together and that'll be the topic.
What version is Chris doing?
Chris, can you?
He's read ours,
So
obviously, we have procedural issues, it's his decision, what would he say?
So Chris, I don't know if you heard that.
No.
So this is a very directional microphone. I'm impressed how directional this microphone is. So based on your document, you spent a lot of time talking about the new approach, the full
Yeah.
rewrite. I believe you say that neighborhood-based code, which I think is abbreviation for form-based code. You spent a lot of time talking about that. So what is your formal recommendation based on this? Which one would you recommend us do?
Sure. So first of all, I want to see the reason I wasn't using that term form-based code, not just for marketing reasons, but because I do think it's a little different because it doesn't, form-based code takes this sort of transect approach that you might see and it has it's not just districts, they have a very sort of, they're based upon intensity of development is the form-based code. And I think this is a little different when we call it a neighborhood. It's almost like a little bit lighter version in my mind.
So the common denominator is the theme of each neighborhood.
Yes, that's I think that's why I was calling it that. I think it's a slight nuance, but distinct.
Well, one good thing about that is we already have a commission that helps us with aesthetics. So that could be helpful at some point down the road.
Okay. My recommendation is to go for the complete change. And the reason I say that is you clearly have a lot of issues with process. Even though we could change the process in the existing code, I would say we might as well do it with a fresh lens and make the people, such as the planning board chair and the zoning board and the building inspector, who are, in my mind, the three primary groups or people that need to be comfortable and administer this code, get it right from the outset, as opposed to trying to change what's there today. And rather than trying to resolve conflicts, we can just start out without having conflicts, is kind of my thinking.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Right.
All right, so based on that, are we all in agreement that we can do a remote Zoom ZAC meeting on the 11th of July? I am not seeing any heads say no. Marilyn, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I have no problem doing a Zoom meeting. I just feel that we have not had enough time as a ZAC to talk. Now, maybe there's some conversations happening behind the scenes, but I think all the ZAC members need to be at the table or on the Zoom talking about the pros and cons of doing that. I know the comprehensive plan says a fully updated zoning ordinance. But again, you know, we haven't even had a chance to share our thoughts. And I question what the public may say at the public meeting. I think that's going to be a lot of change. Some of it may be good, some bad, and you know, so.
Well, to address your concern, we are literally scheduling more time amongst ourselves to talk about the decision. So we're getting more time on the calendar for us to talk.
And
On the 11th.
I think Marilyn, you know,
Yeah, without benefit of really asking Chris the questions that we have, or at least that I have on his memo, because I've got some questions, and I have a point that I really want Chris to be aware of and to correct in this memo, because it's mischaracterization, it's misunderstanding at the very least. And
Okay,
it
so
needs to be
there's
corrected.
multiple ways to do that. This goes for everybody. Anybody at any time can reach out to Chris and express your opinion, your concerns. You just go to Chris, email, you're part of the advisory committee. And option number 2 is Chris is on the call now. We can ask him if he can join on the 11th to continue that. I mean, that's also an option. I don't know what Chris's schedule is. I'm not signing up for it, but we can ask if he's available on the 11th.
I think that's a conversation for us to have. I don't know. And if we want feedback from Chris, we can reach out independently.
Yeah.
But, you know, Marilyn,
Can I just say one thing? Chris, you should tell us what you think, what decisions you need from us. Exactly. I mean, for instance, do you need a decision about the historic commission? I mean, you should tell us exactly what you're looking for. We'll discuss it, and then we'll give you what we feel and go from there, I think.
I think he has done that. It's in the
Chris, is there
memo.
one fundamental
What I'm
question on
just
it?
trying to say is there's a mischaracterization of someone's understanding of what the issue is, and I want that to set the record straight in Chris's memo, because it's perpetuating a misunderstanding. Just to be kind about
Yeah,
it.
just send an email. Send him an
Yeah,
email.
I would recommend just sending an email soon, and then I can update the memo if there is misinformation. As it relates to historic commission, I was essentially reporting what other people said, whether it was right or wrong. It was
Yeah.
impressions that people have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
Is-
Chris, are you able to join us Zoom? Do you want to have Chris on the 11th, or is it up to us?
Do we need to limit? I think it's just real. I mean, you're saying it's.
I don't need some more time to make a decision.
I don't either.
You don't
You
need
know
it.
what I mean? No, and historic commission, that's the one thing we have to do.
Okay, then let's do a vote. I think it's perfect time to do a vote if we need more time for the 11th. All in favor of needing more time for the 11th to make a decision on which fundamental way we go, raise your hand. Need more time. Okay, Marilyn. Nays have it. We don't need time. So that said, let's make a decision now. All in favor of having a full rewrite, raise your hands. All against having a minimal part? 2. All right. it
I'm sorry,
is
a moderate,
Moderate.
a full or
Yes,
moderate?
It's,
I can't
the vote
hear.
is 8 to 11 to have a full rewrite. You've raised your hand for a moderate approach, right, Marilyn? Or you're
Well-
abstaining, or what is your vote?
My vote is I can't hear what everybody's saying, so I don't know what you called for the first vote.
Okay, so we did one vote to say the first vote was who needs more time to make a decision on whether we do a full
Okay.
rewrite or we need more time to do a full rewrite, or no, we don't need more time. And you voted for needing more time. Correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Everyone else said they don't need more time, so that vote failed. The second vote was, given that no one else needs more time other than you, we threw the vote on which decision we want to go with. Do we want to go with a full rewrite or a moderate approach? Rory wants to go with the moderate approach. Everyone else in the room went for the full rewrite. What is your vote?
Yeah, well, part of the problem is I don't have enough information, and.
Okay, so are you
I know the plan
abstaining?
says a full, no, I'm not. I know the
Okay.
plan says a fully updated zoning ordinance, and if that's the full rewrite, then
It can be
so
both.
be it.
It can be both. It's just the approach we take to get there. That's what we're talking about. So are you voting for a full rewrite, abstaining from it, or are you voting for the medium approach?
I have no problem with the fully updated zoning ordinance. I just don't know what the implications are because we have not had time to really debrief Chris.
Okay. So what is your?
And we have so many
Put it on the table.
dysfunctional operational issues that are never going to be solved just by updating the zoning code.
So so we're not going to get more time as a ZAC committee. We've already made that vote. You've outvoted. So the vote's on the table now, because everybody here in the room wants to make a decision, whether we do the full rewrite or we go with the moderate approach. And you're saying you don't have enough
Okay,
information to
what's
make.
the vote? Call the question, Matt.
We already did several times.
And I called this explicitly for you again. So let me call it for you again. Do you want to have, are you in favor for a full rewrite, a moderate approach, or are you abstaining from a vote because you do not have enough information to make the decision?
Okay, for the second time, the comprehensive plan calls for a fully updated zoning code.
And you can get both of them for both
I am
options. We're not
voting
we're not
for
debating that. That's not on the
that.
table.
I am voting for that.
Both votes are for that. There's two ways to skin a cat. The moderate approach to get exactly that, or the full rewrite to get that. We're talking approach, not end result.
The full rewrite to get
Okay.
towards compliance with
All right.
the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay.
For the third time.
No, that it wasn't, no. All right. We're past 8 o'clock. I think the last item on the agenda. So Chris, you have a decision from us, full rewrite.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think it's a good decision. I just want to take 1 second and say again, I'm sorry that this memo wasn't what you were expecting. I don't know, Matt, if it's helpful just as a sort of semi-defense for myself to send from some other, I could dig up from some other firms, some of these zoning diagnostics that are, I actually thought that this was more detailed than what you often see for these documents.
Okay.
And so,
Perhaps
again,
it's my ignorance in reaction to my ignorance. Perhaps
and
that
so
is-
that's why I hope it was just more of a misplaced, expectation. And I apologize if I wasn't clear enough, but I also want to assure you that we are, going to have an awesome updated zoning code. I would like to speak maybe Rory at some time soon, one-on-one, especially with you. And I know because this was not your favorite approach, but you are such a critical user. I think it would be helpful. And I can speak to whomever else wants to as well, but I just think that would be helpful.
Well, fine. Let me reiterate to everyone on call, including Marilyn. You can reach out to Chris at any time, ask him any questions, phone call, email. There's no restrictions to reach out to Chris from the Zap. All right. So Chris, so we've given you a decision. What is the next steps? You tell us what's going to happen next.
Okay. The next step is I will put together the framework of this. I will base it upon the outline that I included in the assessment. However, if people have opinions about that at the outset, we can make changes. So you could, again, email me directly, or if it wants to go through you, Matt. But I will start from that, and I will basically block out the main sections of this report. And then we will have updates as we go along, where we're going through the sections to basically finalize the draft iteratively, is how I see it. And so
Okay,
what I
so-
will do is I'll just use the definition section for example. I will take the definitions that you have. I will take the comments because we have had a conversation with the building commissioner, and I will incorporate those and present it to this group. And then this group will have to say, especially certain people in this group who actually use the code will have to say, well, we're missing this definition, or this definition doesn't work for me. Those are the kinds of things, unless they're in the zoning gap analysis, which I don't think I've seen too many that were related specifically to definitions. I'm just using this as an example. But if I do see something in the gap analysis, then I can address it that way as well.
That makes sense. As part of the next steps, will you put out like the sequencing or which sections we should expect when, kind of like a schedule, so we know which topics will be coming up? So if we want to do due diligence, we can come prepared for it.
Yes, I can put that together. Yeah.
That would be helpful for us to kind of know which section we're going to be talking about when.
Okay.
All right, before we move on to the next topic, anything else for Chris on this topic? Okay. All right, public comment, last agenda item. Anyone on the call, anyone in the room would like to?
I'm happy that you were forward, right? You remember, how many years ago, Stephanie Ferrandino, was our attorney, and he did throw it out, start over. You know, there's so much is not right in that code. And she, you know, this work is very happy that you're doing that.
Yeah, fine.
First off, thanks to everybody for the work on this. As always, we appreciate. I know we've been working on this hours on this, and the entire board appreciates that fact. Chris, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay.
I can hear you. Yes.
One of the things, and I did not receive the memo, even though I was CC'd on it, but we're going to make sure I got a copy of it. So make sure you have my right email on that. But I did get to review it. And one of the things that, you know, this is the lawyer in me that probably gets flagged and stuff like this. You talk about redundancies or contradictions in code with other pieces of code, and maybe tossing certain instances of something like this open section for what you're looking at. And ultimately, I just want to make sure that you were flagging to back to us, the board, anything you may be tossing out, so we can make sure that we don't need it elsewhere along the way. And we'll handle that if you're not going to handle that aspect of the code in 120 or something like that, like you cited. So I just want to make sure we're inventorying anything you're kind of tossing out the door in the process. And I'm going to be overlap, I might not be, so we can evaluate it and make sure that we're not losing a crucial piece of code that we otherwise need it for some reason.
Yeah,
Can we
understood.
make a separate section, like in the appendix of here are the sections that have been removed or
Yeah.
omitted or something, so we can track it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, version control we start with version control, but if we're throwing it all out, our version control, in my mind, would start first iteration. Once we get a first chunk in there, that goes in there, then a second chunk, and then version control, we can see track changes on any. But if we're going to throw out the whole thing, we have to make sure whatever's being imported back in, the delta is captured somewhere else. Okay. Jen, is there any other comments or anyone who has their hand raised or any other items from the Zoom world?
There is no one in the Zoom world paying attention to this evening. I apologize.
You
I
are paying-
tried, they're just not there.
Don't discount yourself. You're there paying attention.
Oh, but I'm here and it was
That's
riveting.
right. That's right.
I have no questions, however.
What are we writing Tylerville right now?
Tylerville.
Getting a little advanced knowledge.
All right. Good for you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate everyone's time, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Chris. And Chris, I'll give you a call at some point this week. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right,
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Good night.
Right.